today. I did put together a bit of a presentation to walk through. I'm going to share my screen here as well with you. Excellent. All right, there we go. And so I want to talk about what's new in Lean UX. And you may ask yourself, well, why would there be anything new in Lean UX? And that's a fair question. Lean UX was originally published. Josh Seid and I submitted the manuscript in December of 2012. So 8.5 years ago. The book was published in March of 2013. In 2016, we published the second edition of the book, which was a significant update and improvement, just overall improvement of the book and an attempt to make it more relevant. In the last 6 months or so, Josh and I have written the manuscript for the third edition of Lean UX, which will be out later this year. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited about it for a variety of reasons. I'm super excited about it because the fact that this is still a relevant conversation, it's both good and bad, right? On the one hand, I want this conversation to be over, to sort of like, it should just be the way that we work. And then we don't have to teach teams to do this. But the fact that there's still interest in this and the fact that folks are still excited about this and that there's material to update has made it very, very exciting. And so the third edition will be out later this year. We just turned in the first draft of a complete manuscript about 2 weeks ago. And this is a preview of what the cover might look like when it's actually published. And I want to go over some of the significant updates from the book itself. And what's interesting is that this time around in 2016, when we wrote the second edition, a lot of the updates were just based around just making it a better book, just writing better, structuring it better, adding some more content, of course, but really just making it a better book, just to read and to learn from. This time around, we've really beefed up a couple of the sections here and completely redesigned the information architecture of the book. And really primarily, the book is now, in the third edition, is going to be completely organized around the Lean UX canvas. So a couple of years ago, we took a lot of the independent assumptions declaration exercises that we do and that we talk about in Lean UX and that we practice with the teams that we work with. And we created a canvas out of it called the Lean UX canvas. Now, it's just a canvas like all the other canvases you're familiar with. It's a facilitation tool. And if you haven't used it, it's designed to help you and your teams walk through the process of declaring the assumptions around your project or your product or your initiative, really thinking through who your target audience is, what success you'd like to see from them, what ideas that might help you be successful, and then really thinking through how to design experiments to help you validate or test those ideas. The canvas is designed explicitly to help force a conversation that starts off with the current state of things. And so the current condition, if you're familiar with any of the Toyota Kata stuff, we're talking about the current condition. What's the business problem that we're trying to solve? And what's the current state of our users and our customers? And that's really sort of the left side of the canvas there. The right side of the canvas is what'll happen later, or the target condition. What are we actually trying to achieve? And in boxes 2 and 4, we talk about the business outcomes. So what are the behavior changes that we want to see in our target audience that tells us that we've built something of value? And then the user outcomes and benefits. What are the users getting out of this? Are they being more successful? Are they achieving their goals? Are they getting to spend more time with their children or spending less time filling out mortgage applications, right? That type of thing. And so we've got the current condition and the target condition. Now, the bridge between now and later is box number 5 in the canvas. It's a question around, well, how do we think we'll get there? What are the solutions, the features, the products, the services that we believe will get us from here to there? And again, those are our best guesses. Those are our assumptions. And then the bottom third of the canvas is focused on testing those ideas. So how do you take all those assumptions, put them together into compelling short stories called hypothesis statements, and then test the hypotheses that warrant that level of validation. And that's what the canvas walks you through that process. And so we've completely redesigned the book in an effort to based around this information architecture. So whereas the book has traditionally had 8 chapters or 10 chapters, it actually has something close to like 17 or 18 chapters, because there's at least 8 just simply around this particular problem. We walk through every single box. We walk through every single activity, why we do it, how to do it, patterns, anti-patterns, how to facilitate the exercise, so that you can then take the canvas and the book and create this activity with your teams in the hopes of sort of creating the bandwidth for product discovery and for lean UX to take place. And so that's a big change that's coming up in the book itself. And I'm happy to, in the Q&A, answer any questions that you may have about the lean UX canvas. But that's kind of the fundamental information architecture of the book is key there. Another big addition to the book that we've added since the last time was an explicit exercise about how to prioritize your hypotheses. So if you go through the canvas and you generate a lot of hypotheses, folks, the next question that naturally comes up is, well, how do we prioritize these hypotheses? Like which ones should we test? Which ones should we not test? And one of the things that we've added to the canvas itself is this fancy 2x2 matrix that we call the hypothesis prioritization canvas. Now, the purpose of this particular exercise is to focus your efforts, because you're going to generate a lot of, if you go through that canvas process, you're going to generate a lot of hypotheses. And the reality is that you shouldn't test all those hypotheses. In fact, you shouldn't build all those hypotheses. We have to determine where to focus our efforts and which efforts to apply to each hypothesis. And so once you've generated that full list of hypotheses, we came up with this prioritization matrix to help you decide what to do next. Now, the 2x2, you've got an x-axis of risk, low risk to high risk, and a y-axis of perceived value. The reason why it's perceived value is because you actually don't know whether or not it's going to be valuable or impactful. You're making an assumption based on your experience, your expertise, evidence that you may have. But until you actually deploy it at scale, you don't know that it's actually going to have an impact, a significant impact on the business. And so once you've got that list of hypotheses, you start to map those hypotheses on this 2x2 matrix, right, along risk and value. Now, the risk determination of your hypothesis is going to be contextual to each hypothesis. It's not going to be identical across the board, because some hypotheses are going to have technical risk, right? We want to build this thing that integrates new technology with our legacy technology stack, and we don't know if it's going to work. Or we've never built a virtual reality application or an AR application. And so there's a lot of technical risk. There might be design risk. We're going to reinvent the way that people interact, in an e-commerce environment, and nobody's ever done it before. And so that might be a risk for your hypothesis. You may have brand or market risk. You might want to move into a new market space where, where you may not have a lot of experience, or your brand may not be that well known. So there might be risk around that. And so every time you're evaluating a hypothesis, you've got to take a look at the contextual risk for that hypothesis. As you map your hypotheses on this matrix, the ones that land in box number 1, the ones that are high risk and high value, those are the ones that you test. And we talk a lot about how to test things in the book, how to build experiments, MVPs, etc. But you want to test high risk, high value hypotheses. Why? Because if you get it right, you stand the chance of making a significant impact to your customer and to your business. And if you get it wrong, you stand a chance of making a significant impact, albeit a negative one, to your customer and to your business. And so you want to test those hypotheses as quickly as possible. The hypotheses that end up in box number 2, those are the ones where you're confident that they're going to have a high impact on the business, and they're low risk. You've got enough evidence to justify it. You're confident that this is going to be something that's going to be successful. We don't want to test that. We want to build it, we want to ship it, and then measure it. Just make sure that it lives up to our expectations. Anything that falls below the risk line, we're definitely not going to test. And in most cases, we're not even going to build. So if it ends up in quadrant 4, where it's high risk and low value, we just take those hypotheses and we discard them. We throw them away, right? Why would you work on that at all? Anything that ends up in the third quadrant, in quadrant 3, where it's low risk and low value, we're definitely not testing it. And in most cases, we're not building it. Every now and again, some stuff will land that you need to build in order to be in business. For example, you're an e-commerce shop, you need to take money, and that's, you need to be able to take payments. That's not how you're going to differentiate yourself in the marketplace. And so that hypothesis or that feature idea may end up in quadrant 3. You don't need to test it. You're going to need to build it, but it's not going to differentiate anything. But generally speaking, if it falls below the risk line, we don't test it. And generally, we don't build it. And the goal, of course, is to move stuff out of box 1 as quickly as possible into box 2 or below the line. And this canvas really, this matrix really forces that conversation around what are we going to work on, what are we going to test, what are we going to ship, what are we not going to work on. And then as we build learnings, if we start killing our hypotheses, we can get a sense of where to go for the next hypothesis and the next and the next. And so this canvas in this way, this exercise is also in the new book. And just to kind of put this in perspective for you, you're like, well, Jeff, that's a couple of canvases. How do they work together? This activity takes place between boxes 6 and 7. So in the Lean UX canvas, in box 6, you are creating your hypothesis backlogs. You're generating all these hypotheses. In box 7, you've identified which one you want to test first, and you're starting to really think through the riskiest parts of that hypothesis. And so the prioritization exercise needs to take place between box 6 and 7, so that you choose one from the list, and then you can start to test it and design an experiment around it. And so this is in the new edition as well. Another element of the 3rd edition of Lean UX that we beefed up significantly is dual track Agile. This whole idea of how do you balance discovery work and delivery work together. Now, to do that, we've started to be a lot more explicit about the process, and we've begun to illustrate it a bit more specifically based on work that Josh and I have done in the last couple of years with Scrum.org. Josh Seiden and I worked with 2 professional Scrum trainers from Scrum.org to build a course called Professional Scrum with UX. And in doing so, we were forced to have some pretty tough conversations with some pretty hardcore Scrum folks about how to bring together Scrum and Lean UX and design work and research work and product discovery work. And we found the 2 folks that we worked with, and Scrum.org as an organization, open-minded and progressive, and it was a really productive collaboration that really helped us think through how to start to visualize and talk about this work in a way that makes sense. Because at its core, Scrum and UX and design actually have the same goals when they set out. It's just making the 2 work together is difficult, right? Scrum wants to build highly valuable software that meets customer needs. UX designers and product managers and the processes that we use, we want to do the same things. And yet bringing these things together has always been challenging. And so in the 3rd edition, we talk a lot about dual track Agile, doing discovery and delivery together. One team, 2 types of work, and having that team kind of move through a constantly shifting mix of discovery and delivery work, pulling work from the same backlog and starting to mix things together. And so we talk specifically and explicitly about that in the book as well. This is another illustration of some of the work that we discuss in the 3rd edition of Lean UX about how to structure your backlogs. And this is, again, material pulled directly from the Professional Scrum with UX course, where teams will say, well, listen, we're going to separate discovery and delivery, right? UX, Lean UX work and delivery work, right? Well, we don't want to do that because eventually we're just going to prioritize one of those backlogs. And so as we start to move forward, one of the things that we want to do is maybe start to kind of meld the two and have discovery stories and delivery stories, discovery stories and delivery stories. That's a good step forward. Ultimately, where we hope we get to is a situation where the story itself is a mix of discovery and delivery, right? Sort of the highly mature version of this is this element on the right here. And again, there's a significant amount of content around this in the book that really details how to arrive here, what to look for, what these user stories look like, because we want to make sure that this book is as practical and as tactical as it can be. And to do that, again, we get very, very specific about the activities. One of the things that we do in that professional Scrum class that's now in the Lean UX book is we look at the Scrum diagram, right? What does the Scrum diagram look like? And we start to map UX and design and Lean UX activities on top of that and start to have a conversation around where do these things fit, right? When does a design sprint happen? When do we do prototyping? When do we do customer interviews and that type of thing? And where does that fit into the Scrum model, right? One of the things that we add in here, you'll notice right there at the center of this diagram is that the Scrum team, up until very recently, never explicitly actually mentioned a designer on the team. And so we added that into the diagram to make sure that it's there. And in some instances got approval from it, from the scrum.org folks to kind of say, look, yes, this is exactly how we should move forward. So a lot of stuff on Agile and dual track Agile, especially there. We do significantly enhance the conversation around OKRs in the book itself. And why do we do that? We do that because if OKRs are done correctly, we talk about specifically how to do OKRs, they explicitly demand that the teams do discovery work, that they do Lean UX work. And so perhaps it's self-serving, but teaching folks how to write great OKR statements where the key results are outcomes ensures that those teams do discovery work, ensures that those teams build a deep empathy for their customers, and they build that culture of learning and increase their organizational agility. Because if OKRs are done correctly, and this is covered in the book, then we don't tell teams what to build. We don't tell them what to make. Instead, they have to discover the best combination of code, copy, and design that will achieve the key result or achieve the outcome. And that's extremely powerful as well. And so before I take questions, there's one of the things that people talk about, ask us a lot about, is case studies. Lots of case studies around Lean UX. And it's hard. It's hard to get organizations to share. And one of the things we pushed for was to get as many new case studies into the book as possible. Validately is a startup that sold to users Zoom not too long ago, founded by a guy named Stephen Cohen. And what they do is they help people do user research. They do automated research panels, video recording, note taking, and they actually automate the creation of the usage report. And in the book, we talk about how Stephen and his team did hundreds of customer development interviews to really understand that the pain point for user researchers, who were their target audience, was the creation of the report itself. They would do the research.